Hi, this is Sean from Rusted Rooster Farm again. We're going to be going through what it takes to construct one of these grain bins cost-wise. So I'm going to just go through piece by piece and explain it and the cost that I paid for it. I think your costs might vary a little bit, but I'll give you a pretty good general idea. So the first item we have for the grain bin itself is the culvert. Now I bought a 42-inch culvert. Because the outside dimension of the 42-inch culvert was 48 inches, and I wanted to be able to use plywood and other like 4-foot sheet of tin, other things. I thought that having a 48-inch outside dimension was worth having. Also, if you wanted to truck them, then you wouldn't be over width. So that's why I went with the 42-inch. The one thing you might notice is these usually get sold in 20-foot sections, so you might have to buy enough to build 4 bins at once. I sectioned it down into per bin cost, but I'm not sure if you would be able to get somebody to cut up one of these culverts and sell you a section of it. Okay, next item on the list we have the flooring. Now the flooring is a galvanized flooring that I got from McNichols. It's G90 galvanized. It is 3 30-second holes in the 10 on what they call a 3/16 stagger. Now I had bought these in 4-foot by 10-foot sheets because I thought, you know, the slanted one, I have one with a slanted floor and I knew it was going to be an oval piece. I didn't know how oval it was, so I bought a 10-foot section. It didn't turn out being oval enough for to use the whole 10-foot section. So a 4-foot by 4-foot sheet, I think, would be a much wiser thing. Then you could just, you know, cut around that for each bin, and it would ship a lot cheaper. So part of that flooring cost was shipping. I think you could probably trim a little bit off the flooring cost. Next we have the grain gates. Those came from Sloan Express. It's just a 9-inch by 9-inch grain gate. You could go a little bit larger if you wanted. It probably wouldn't hurt too much. It was $35 for the grain gate, and that was shipped. So can be bought reasonable, quite a few places. One thing I did do is we didn't get the bottom exactly right, so I put a piece of M-seal on the bottom to make sure it seals good so you don't leak air. The tin chute off the grain gate here, you should have enough leftover tin to bend one of those from the roofing tin. Okay, next we have the screws, which, so I bought boxes of 5 pounds to construct these bins, and constructed all 4 bins off the boxes. So through the hollow piece of culvert down into the plywood, also down into the pallet. So you kind of do need 5-inch for those ones. I screwed them about every 8 inches. Make sure it was good and secure. You see your piece of plywood underneath there. And then I have I had bought a box of 2-inch and 3-inch screws. Depending on if I was screwing down into this, I would use a longer screw, or just screwing into here shorter. So I used quite a few screws. I made sure there was a lot of screws through this piece of plywood into the pallet to make sure that it can't break loose from the pallet. Also for the roofing, we have 1-inch screws that we screwed down into this 3/4 inch roofing, or the 3/4 inch plywood. They didn't, some of them went through a little bit, but not too bad. So we also used some longer screws to go through this. This is just a piece of 1/2-inch plywood, and it's screwed on there for the bungee cords with the little hook and the bungee. I'll show you the other top here. Okay, so then we also use the steel screws, the metal roofing screws, to screw these tabs on, and these just keep it centered so when you set it up there, you have something to set it down on before you're pulling on the gasket. Okay, we have the plastic pallets, which I was able to purchase for $45 a piece. used. Now I ended up with a couple different styles. This style has fiberglass reinforcement in it, which was pretty handy. This style here does not, and it also doesn't have a bottom. It's just kind of through that way. On this side it has a bottom so that it can't tip off the forks, but there's a couple of different styles. You may or may not be able to purchase those locally. If I would look for a pallet recycler around or a big shipping place, they might have some plastic pallets that they would sell you used. I don't know where you would purchase plastic pallets new. You always could screw it to a wooden pallet. Just replace the pallet when it rotted or broke though. We have the plywood. Now I bought 3/4 inch plywood for the bottom. Since I was constructing multiple bins, I wanted 3/4 inch on the bottom so that it was good and stiff. And then I put 5/8 inch on the top. We didn't figure we needed it to be that thick. You could just buy a sheet of 3/4 and use it for the top and the bottom at the same time. Or if you're building multiple bins and you wanted your cover to be a little bit lighter, you can build that out of a lighter grade plywood. I stuck with Advantech, which is it's kind of like a chipboard, but it's made for flooring. It's glued together pretty tightly, and it tends to hold up to the weather a little bit better than plywood or just your regular OSB chipboard. It tends to weather quite nicely. Okay, so we have the PVC fitting now, and that's two pieces. We have a male and female part that I screwed together through the culvert in order to put some aeration underneath the bin. This also has the ability to be, just capped off if we wanted. We also have caulking. This is what I used for caulking, NovaFlex silicone. It's a metal roof caulking. And I used that mainly. We used a little bit around the grain gates here. You can see where if there was a little hole, we just kind of filled it with caulking. But mainly we used it around the edge of the bin here. If you don't do a very good job cutting your flooring, then you need to caulk it some. So I put down 2 tubes of caulking just to make sure you had plenty for what you wanted. Okay, so we have the sheet metal next at $50. We use that for the roof here, and just to kind of cover and protect the plywood so we can leave it outdoors, and it should shed the water and protect the rain and moisture from going right on that plywood. As well as another piece down at the bottom there. I actually used one of the caps that I had initially ordered for this culvert that I thought was just going to cap it off, and I wasn't going to have to do this with plywood, but it turned out to be real cheesy. So this is just one of them with the rim broke off. But you want something down on the bottom so any moisture that gathers down there doesn't sit directly on that wood. So I would try to focus to eliminating some of that. So you'll need one piece for the top and one piece for the bottom, which can be cut out of a 4x8 sheet of this. And you should be able to find that along with the caulking, along with this M seal. Where does it say? M seal right there. You should be able to get those products from your local roofing supply store. Anybody who custom bends metal roofing trim should have the flat stock just for the roof and the floor, and should be able to get what you need from them. Okay, so this M seal is what we put around the top. It's got a sticky on one side here, so it sticks to the plywood very well. You just stick it around there after you've traced out where your culvert's going to land, and this is to seal it, make it airtight and watertight on the top. This is what it looks like on, so we've put this lid on and strapped it down with the bungee cords. so that M seal will just expand out onto the edge of the culvert and form a nice gasket all the way around to keep any water or moisture, critters, anything from getting in and out. Especially if you have a little bit of an uneven cut. You can see where we cut a little bit uneven there, but this just kind of fills up the gaps nicely. Okay, for the hardware, that was just these hooks right here. That was $4. The bungee cords were $3-4 a piece. I bought a good name brand USA one because they don't weather crack like the cheap ones seem to weather crack and break really fast. Okay, we have two 16-foot 2x4s I used, and those got cut up for the floor framework underneath there for the all the different little legs. By the time you made all your cuts, you'd use most of two 16-footers. You could probably do it with 8-footers or whatever else. Okay, so we're gonna go for a quick overview of the bin construction costs. From the local hardware store, I got the culvert, the screws, the plywood, the PVC fittings, and the 2x4s. From the local metal roofing place, I got the M seal, the sheet metal, the caulking, the hardware, and the bungee cords. I purchased the flooring from McNichols, the grain gates from Sloan Express, and the plastic pallets from our local like pallet supplier. Okay, now we're going to discuss add-ons. So these are the 2 horsepower 70-gallon dust collectors from Harbor Freight. They come with that flexible piece of pipe. I purchased 2 45-degree street elbows. You can see them stuck in the top of this dust collector. This is what you get from Harbor Freight right here. You have your street elbows. I did that so we could adapt it down so it could get to the level. And you want a shallow bend whenever you're involving air so you don't have too much air restriction around the bend. As well as I cut a piece of 10-foot PVC up because I needed one to go right here to hook the hose to, as well as one at the end of the hose to hook into the back of the aerator pipe here. So that just shoves in the back, and you don't have to secure it. It'll just push in there, and the air pressure is not enough to blow it out. So you have that next to an older dust collector that I have here. This was a barrel top dust collector. I took the barrel top piece out of it, and a 4-inch PVC happens to shove right over the end of that, and you can shove that right into the aerator port as well. So this is a couple of options. I did test these two against each other. This is an old 1 horsepower one, whereas this one is 2 horsepower, and there is an airflow difference. The 2 horsepower dried a fair amount better, and it was moving more air, as we can see in one of the other videos where I do a comparison on that. But for the cost of the add-ons, by the time you know, it's mostly in the aerator or the dust collector. Then you have your PVC fittings and pipes. So to add aeration to the bin is about $225 after the $715 construction cost. So there's around $1,000 a bin in getting these all set up and ready to push some air. Just going to do a simple overview of the test equipment used to perform the evaluation of this. So these are 2 Pocket Lab weather sensors. They were $98 a piece, and I used these to you can monitor your temperature and humidity if you're going to add heat. Even if you're not adding heat and you want to know what the temperature and humidity headed into the bin is, as well as another one you can just set on top of the grain, and that'll tell you what your temperature and humidity leaving the grain is. So it's a pretty accurate judgment. If you want to compare drying methods, you can always, or drying fans, you could always, you know, swap your fans and then test it again. And that'll tell you which fan's working better without having to wait a long time, or just plain old wonder which one's working better. We have the sampling probe. Now it's important when you're drying grain, it's not going to dry evenly over the whole bin. The bottom's going to dry first, and then it's going to work its way up through the bin. So it's important. You can open the gate and get a sample out of the bottom, and you can reach down and get a sample off the top, but you really should be sampling the middle of the bin. Is going to give you a more accurate reading on what the majority of your grain is. So this was a grain sampling probe. I bought it at NASCO, which is an online store, the same place as I bought the sensors. And this was $160. It comes apart there to hold the grain, and then it just kind of pops back together. You push it down. After it's pushed all the way down, you pull it, and then it turns sideways, and you can fill it full of grain on the up pull. It also comes with handle extensions, so if you had a large bin and you wanted to sample the center of it, you could with this sampling probe. And then last but not least, we have I have a moisture meter, which is an Agritronics. This is the AgMac Plus. You'll see it in one of the other videos, and it does a really nice job of telling you your grain moisture and your test weight. It has a lot of different grains in there. I think there's something like 20 different grains you can choose from to give you a more accurate result. Okay, so the one thing that we haven't got to yet, we have the construction costs and we have the add-on costs, but we don't have the construction time. So I kept a lot better track of the flat floored and the flat roofed ones. And those ones we have about 12 hours per bin in. And that was building 2 bins at once. So we have about roughly 24 hours of work time in building these 2 bins. And this was after we had the materials gathered up. This bin, however, with the slanted roof and the slanted floor, this was the second one that we built. And it seems like we had over 20 hours in each bin. When it came to cutting this angle correctly, it was really challenging. We actually recut this angle about 3 times trying to get a smooth angle there. And then inside, when it came to the flooring, we ran into the same problem underneath. The angles that the boards had to be, or the 2x4s had to be cut at underneath there, was really challenging. And we couldn't just lay the culvert on top of the flooring and cut it. We couldn't lay it on top of the roof and cut it, just because of the way that the angle is. It makes it a little bit oval. It was very difficult to deal with. So in hindsight, I would not suggest making a slanted roof bin. I would just suggest sticking with the flat ones. You gain stackability. Yeah, you have to sweep a little bit more grain out, but not that much more grain than you have to sweep out of this one. And they're a whole lot less headache to build. So if you want to look at getting one of these bins set up, I would say realistically, about $725 or so. If you add the aeration, it's another $225, plus about 12 hours of time is a pretty fair assessment. Thanks for watching, and hope you guys try and build one. Let me know in your comments, or email me directly with how you guys make out, if you can get it any cheaper or do it any better. Thanks for watching.